I believe we're at the Kitzer on page 213, about to start the new Mimer 15 on page 215. Is that correct, Moshe? Am I at the right place?
Yes.
Thank you. I have to be more careful now. I have two hawks watching me. Anyway. Chaver Toiv, Kitzer, 213. Chaver Toiv, Misayeh, Limtzei, Mumei, Haruach. A good friend helps someone find the blemishes, the deficiencies of spirit, of character, Umayel, Lakar, Hadeos, and helps the individual. A good friend helps us uproot the bad ideologies and philosophies called Deos. Umidois rois, and he helps us remove our ugly character traits. And he also helps us, number 3, ulahaknois hatoivos, and to acquire good traits. So here we have 3 beautiful things that a good friend, and in a way, if you want to know if you are a good friend or if you have a good friend, ask yourself, does my friend help me change those issues up here that are warped? Number two, does my friend help me remove midas rois, not nice things of character? And number 3, does my friend help me acquire good traits, more good traits? That's what the Rebbe says here. V'chavera, what about a bad friend? Goyrem hashrosas hayedios. He causes the rooting, from the word shoresh, hashrosas, the rooting of yedios hayedios, of hayedios umidas rois, of ideologies, philosophies, shittas, and behavior and character behavior that are no good. Haitztakskus behasosas zulosoi. Well, we come to Hashem and we say, Hashem, what do you want from me? The reason I have these issues is because my friend, who's a real good friend, we grew up together, we chat together, we played together, we're good friends. He convinced me, hasosas zulosai, he convinced me. Says, and the person argues, Shiba, this is a cause, she'ein tshuvosai shleima, that my tshuva is not complete because of my friend. So that would be an argument to justify why he's not doing complete tshuva. Ushtusai garua mishtus hagoyrem aveda. And this is the end of the Kitzer, but it was the end of the chapter, which is very powerful. This argument is so foolish, it's so shtus. It's even worse than the actual shtus that causes the bad. Okay? So we have a shtus, we have a foolishness that leads us astray. But what's even worse is when you try to justify it. It's powerful. You're a greater fool if you try to justify it. It's bad enough. You're doing what's not appropriate, etc., and you think that you're right in your shita, right? But when you try to justify that, that's even worse. Okay, let's go on now to start the new Maimer on page 215. V'hinei ha'odom kasher ha'odom tzorech ladas. A man who wants to be a man and who is a man must know. V'chol odom sheyesh lo moach bekat kodoi. This is an expression. Any man that has brains in his head, okay, so that's the expression. Moach bekat kodoi. Yodeya, anyone that has any seichel, and guess what? We all have brains in our head. Everyone knows. That man is the choice of amongst all creatures. Man is the best. That God created and formed. Not only amongst the earthly hosts, even amongst the heavenly hosts. And man is the center of all creatures that were created. This is true amongst the heavenly creatures. And so too amongst the earthly creatures. And the Rebbe now begins explaining what he means by this. All creatures that Hashem created, and man amongst them, they have two things which make up a creation, a body and a soul. This is the common denominator between the earthly hosts and the heavenly hosts. Although outwardly there's a difference between the heavenly host and the earthly host. And what is that? The way Hashem created the earthly hosts, they are a combination, harkavas, a combination of the four elements: fire, eish, ruach, air, mayim, water, afar, and dust. And he put them together, and he created all of the earthly hosts. Whereas angels, celestial beings, stars, moon, sun are only created of two elements: eish v'ruach, fire and air. As it says in the pasuk, he makes his angels with ruach, air, mishorsav, his attendants, his servants, eish lohet, a burning fire. So which in this pasuk, Hillel, what do we see? That we're referring to Malachav, angels, and Meshorsav. And you understand, what does the pasuk say? Ruach, Ruchais, and Eish. So from this Moshe we know that only two elements out of four were used to create the heavenly hosts, i.e., the celestial beings, the angels, the sun and the moon, and the stars, etc.
But Rabbi Delphin, the sun and the moon are also Earth. When they came back from the moon, they walked, look.
But who says that means the moon is made out of that? The answer is I don't know. I'm not a scientist. Maybe someone knows science and reconciling. I don't know. But
what was the question? I didn't hear it.
No, the question is that the Rabbi Delphin said that even the heavenly hosts are made out of.
I'm not saying.
But they earth.
First of all, Rabbi Dalphin didn't say it. The Rebbe Rashab said it, and it's not the Rebbe Rashab. It's fine. It's the Rambam. The Rambam already quotes it. It's from the Rambam. It's the Rambam in Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah. So Hillel, what he's asking is that there's studies that there's rocks and other besides fire and air. There's afar. That's what he's saying, Yonason.
In space, meaning in space.
Yes. So what came to me just as a thought, without the background of science and the reconciliation, is that doesn't mean that the moon is comprised of does that mean that the moon is comprised of rocks and sand?
It seemingly it is.
Okay. I don't know. I don't know this field. If someone knows, then please. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking a little bit. I was thinking a little bit differently. That you have something I never. You have the Arba Yesodas, Eish Ruach Mayim Va'afar. It's seemingly in a kind of descending order, right? Like.
Okay. So what's your point?
Right. More and more Gashmias, right?
Right.
And then the pasuk says, "Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'zaretz." He created heaven and earth. Beruach Elokim mirachefet. The ruach of Elokim mirachefet al pnei hamayim. So it really the beginning of physical life, so to speak, our world's life begins with the ruach merchefet al pnei hamayim, begins with water, so to speak. Seems to me, based on what we're saying here.
Okay, but so what's the contradiction? I'm not hearing a contradiction.
There's no contradiction. I'm just sort of amplifying a point that seems to come out from the fact that angelic beings are just created with Eish and Ruach in a higher realm.
Right.
That the realm of Gashmias, so to speak, begins with water.
Right. Okay. Yoni and Jonas, if you don't mind muting yourself, I'd appreciate it. Okay. So, Jonathan, we need to look more into your question. Good question. I don't know. I'm sure the science and Torah books have a lot of pages about this. Nevertheless, says the Rebbe Rashab. So, in a way, what's the Rebbe's point? This was a rhetorical remark. To say that there's a similarity between a common denominator between the heavenly hosts and the earthly hosts seems to be otherwise, because they're made out of 4 elements and they're made only out of 2. So now comes his response, his retort. Nevertheless, there is, in this one detail, there is a similarity between them. Shehim bali guf and nefesh. Both have what we call a guf, substance, a material, a sun, the ball of sun, the moon, the nefesh, and they have an energizing force, which we call soul. And as far as that's concerned, as Avi, we're all the same. We have nefesh v'ruach, right? And so does the stars and the moon. Now let's see how he develops it, if he does. Let's see. He says, although the heavenly hosts were created from the more refined elements, i.e. fire and wind, and ruach, and air. Nevertheless, they are still bali guf. They are refined bali guf, but they still have a guf, a material of substance. Utzvah ha'aretz, and the earthly hosts, although they were created through the combining water, dust included, right? In addition to fire and water, they too have a nefesh, a soul. In other words, the chiddush. Listen to this, Chevra. The chiddush by the heavenly hosts is that they have a guf. Because you would think, right? They're heavenly. So what do you mean they have a guf? What do you mean they have a body? What do you mean they have material? That's what the Rambam says in the Chizyon Torah. They have a body. They have a. It's a more refined body, but they have some kind of body. What's the chiddush? What's the novelty by us earthly hosts? That we have a soul. Because Plato, Aristotle, and other early philosophers, they argued, no. All you have is a body, and it's one time. You got one chance, right? Once it's gone, finito. We say no. It's not just a body. It's a body animated by a soul, by a spirit, by an energy. And when the body leaves, the energy continues. Where does it continue if there's no body? Wherever it is. In the house, at the caver, here, there, everywhere, right? But we believe in nefesh. I'm sure those that have taken philosophy courses know what I'm talking about. That the argument of Plato and others was that there's no such a concept as nefesh. Or not the nefesh that we talk about in the Torah. Let's continue. So that's what the Rebbe says, that b'chol zeh hinigam heim bali nefesh. Although the physical earthly hosts were made of 4 elements, which makes it more coarse, more corporeal, more geshem, more gashmiyut, nevertheless, it still has a nefesh. What's the difference between the two? Their nature. The Tevetz Hashemayim, the nature of heavenly hosts, hu bahagboras hatsura ala chomer. New words for some of us, or all of us, or none of us, but regardless, the concept called the overpowering hagboras hatsura, which means the form, al hachomer over matter. Form over matter. The heavenly hosts are more ruchnius. So when you're more ruchnius, your body and your gashmius is not as important. And therefore, although you are in a body, the tzura, the image, the form, or let's use another word, the nefesh, the soul, dominates. And you see this sometimes by people. Some people, they tell the story, not the story, they're a representative of the Belzer Rebbe was by the Rebbe. I heard this from someone who was in the room. So he was lauding, how the Belzer Rebbe didn't eat and didn't sleep, and yet he survived. And he was like praising the Belzer Rebbe. So the Rebbe said to the person, by me, and the Rebbe, I think, met the Belzer Rebbe in Europe once, or whatever. He said, by me, it's not a pella that he doesn't eat. By me is a pella that he does eat. Why? Because he's an ish ruchni. He's a spiritual force. He's all ruchnius. So how is he eating? Yes, Moshe.
Just out of curiosity, Rebbe Dalman, which Belzer Rebbe was this? The current Rebbe?
No, Rebbe Aaron Rokeach, who passed away in 1957. He was like a malach. I think I told you once the story. Yoni, remember the story of my grandfather? My grandfather lived in Tel Aviv. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I walked it from his house near the ocean to where the Belzer had a shul, 66 Achad Am. Okay? I walked it myself. And my grandfather could have gone. And he went sometimes for tefillas. But he davened in a local shul. And he's a Vishnitzer. He was from Vishnitz. For Romania, from Vishnitz, not Belz, Galicia. But after all, everyone knew the Belzer Rebbe was an angel. Whatever he said happens. So why wouldn't you? And then he had an opportunity to have a private yechidus, to talk to him privately. So my grandfather told my father, who told me, he never did that. So my father said, why not? He was afraid. At the time, my grandfather didn't wear a beard. And he wasn't going to put on a beard, for whatever reason, okay? So he said like this, when he goes to the Vishnitzer Rebbe of Chaim Meir in Bnei Brak, he'll come in and he'll go, you're such a nice person, I love you, you're so... It's called in Yiddish, Evet Megeben Aglet. He'll give me a glet, like lat kosher, it's smooth. He'll say, you're so nice, you're so wonderful. And he said, but if I go to the Belzer Rebbe, and he senses or sees that I don't have a beard, and he'll just say one word, and I won't say anything, and I know that I'm not going to put on a beard, the next day I'm going to drop dead. I'm going to die. He was convinced that this Belzer Rebbe, any word that comes out of his mouth is fire. And in a positive way, and, I'm just telling you. So he was, it was known. Like I told you the story the other day with the boy that was speaking all of Torah, and the Belzer Rebbe asked the father to go out, and he spoke to the boy, whatever, and he came out, and he forgot anyway, he wasn't staying anymore. So he was known as a malach. I didn't meet him, but this is what they say. And he didn't eat and sleep much. But the Rebbe said the Pella is, so therefore the Rebbe said the wonder is not that he ate, not that he didn't eat. The Rebbe said that he didn't eat is natural for him. The wonder is how he did eat. How did he even have the ability to eat if he was only ruchnius? And that's what we're learning over here. Hagboras hatsura arachomer. Someone who really is an ish ruchni. We talk about a spiritual person. We throw around this word spiritual person. When you learn Chassidus, and this is again coming from Yutas Kislev, how Chassidus opens your head. And when you learn this, what does it mean to be an ish ruchni? It doesn't mean to have a big bank account or a big Talmud account or a big Hasidus account. It means if you're living with Ruchnius, and in every situation is Ruchnius dominating over Gashmius. Hagbaras, let's look at the language of the Rebbe Rashab. Hagbaras Hatsura ala Chomer. The overpowering of form over matter. That is the definition of an Ish Ruchni. That's it, you got it. and you don't need anyone else to tell you that. Now you have the rest of the life. You'll be able to decide whoever you think is Ish Ruchni or is not. You'll say, is he, in this instance, a person that's Hagbaras Hatsura ala Chomer?
Rebbe,
yes.
Rebbe, you mentioned the Belzer Rebbe, Rabbi Rokel. So I don't know if I told you the story of my grandmother. My grandparents were Belzer Hasidim.
Okay.
And when Hitler came, so everybody, all the Hasidim, they asked my grandparents, my great-grandparents asked her. They went to the Rebbe and they said to the Rebbe, the Hitler is going to break the truce with the Russians. And he's going to come get us just like he's getting the rest of Poland.
Right.
What should we do? So he told my great-grandfather, he says, you're right. He says, we got to get out as soon as possible. He says, what you're going to do is you're going to listen to my instructions. But if you mess up on one of the instructions, I'm not responsible. But if you listen to everything I tell you, your whole entire family will survive the war. That's what he told him. And what did he tell him? He says, you go down to the market, and you take all your valuables, whatever you have, your lachters, your silver becher, and you change it into U.S. dollars. You give all the U.S. dollars to your wife, and you tell her to bake a challah. And you put this was in a book. You put all the dollars into the challah, and wherever you go, you go to Slovakia. They went to Slovakia. They went to Hungary. You go with that piece of challah, with that loaf of bread. So they did that. And they survived until 1944. 1944, they had walked from Poland. It was a place called Sanuk. So Sanuk was on the border between Poland and Ukraine now, but then it was Poland. And they walked to Slovakia, and then they got to Slovakia. There was no war there. It was like the weirdest thing. They said everything was good, but then the Germans were coming there, so they had to leave Slovakia. They went to Hungary. When they got to Hungary, they got arrested. They got arrested not for being a Jew, because they had bought false papers with the money, with the dollars, and they got caught for having forged documents. The whole family. So they put him in jail in Buda. In Buda, they put him in jail in Buda, and then what happened was there's a guy, I think his name was a very famous guy. He lived in Williamsburg afterwards. His name was Chaim Meyer, something or other. I forgot his last name. But this guy came into the prison, and he was wearing a Gestapo jacket with the hat and everything. And he pointed to my grandmother and to her sister. So they thought that's it. They're going to be marched to Auschwitz. And they came out, and there was a parking lot. And he took off his cap. He was wearing a yarmulke. His name was Chaim Meyer. He says, I work for Raoul Wallenberg. So my grandmother said, but I have 3 brothers, and they're inside, and they're going to get caught, and they're going to kill my brothers. So he says, I'm sorry, I only have instructions to save women and children, no men. So my grandmother went to the edge of the parking lot, and there was a cliff. She says, if you don't take my brothers out, I'm going to jump off the cliff. He believed her. He went back. He saved the 3 brothers. Nobody died, not even a distant relative. Nobody died. No cousins, no uncles, and they were all in it. They all,
Amazing.
One of my uncles got caught. One of my uncles was in Auschwitz, but he survived.
Amazing. That was the Belzer Rebbe. That's thank you for sharing the story, because that was the koyach of this Belzer Rebbe. It was like tzaddik olam. Let's continue, Chavre. Okay, and he says, whereas the nature, the makeup of earthly hosts, beteva toldusam, from the very genetics, is hagbaras hachoymer al tzura. It's the opposite, the overpowering of material matter over form. V'hine haguf v'nefesh mikablu masim l'zeh l'zeh. Now the Rashab speaks about this upcoming thought in different places, and he says, when we talk about a guf and a nefesh, a soul and a body, makbilim umatimim, 2 words from the word Kabbalah, to receive, umatimim from the word hasama, correspond. They fit each other. You see, you can't have a high-fluting soul and a low body are going to crash. And by the way, just as a little spooky insight, that's why sometimes people have a mental breakdown. Because there isn't a mahatama, there isn't a mesh that fits between soul and body, and I'm not joking. There is this concept. And that's why it's very important to take the guf and the nefesh and make them mesh with each other, although we always want the spirituality. I'm a spiritual person of Hagbaras Hatsura Alachomer, form over matter. But nevertheless, remember you have matter. And if you don't sleep and you don't eat, you're going to have a breakdown. You have to sleep and eat. Let's continue. Although that the soul and the body, from their essential perspective, are opposite each other. The soul is spiritual. And the body is physical. And spirituality and physicality in the very muhus, in the very essence and core, are contrary to each other. Nevertheless, yet overall there is a similarity between the nefesh and the guf, and each can receive from the other, and each benefits from the other. The zui achas mahaploas de plias, next page 217. Tamim deim. This is one of the great miracles of Yisbarach v'Yisala, of God Almighty. Be'inyan bria yesh mi'ayin, how He creates the world from ex nihilo, v'his chabrusan, and He joins together soul and body. Shehurak. Only b'chei kapoire baruchu, only He, the Creator, can do this. Shemafli lasos. We say it every morning. He does acts of that are wondrous. Mikasha ruchtis begashtis. So Moshe, when we say in Asher Yotzer mafli lasos, the Rashab is teaching us what specifically Yonis are we talking about. We're talking about bringing together spirituality and physicality, guf and nefesh. That's mafli lasos. That's wondrous. It makes no sense. How can you bring them both together? They're two opposites. And Moshe, ba'ofen, in what way does Hashem bring them together? Ba'ofen, in a way, u'makbil u'masim ki'ilu hayu lachodem. He brings them together in such a united way, as though they are one. In other words, look, we wake up in the morning, and it's natural. I mean, we say, of course, Maidani, but in other words, each morning, do we need a tune-up? Do we need a tune-up to get our soul into our body and our body to be comforted our soul? No. You just you say Maidani, wash Nagelwasser, get dressed, wipe your eyes, and start your day, right? So this is a chiddush. This is a great novelty. On one hand, we say it's mafli lasa, it's so wondrous, it's so outrageous to bring together two opposites, and at the very same time, when it happens so natural. That's what the Rashab is saying here. That's what he's saying. Look at the words. Listen. Look at the word ki'ilu, as though. Ki'ilu hayu lachodim. It's as though they're best buddies. They're together. From the very beginning of the creation. It's like soul is body and body is soul. Each one has the other one in it. It's ki'ilu because it's not that way. In other words, soul is soul, and body is body, and soul is created as soul, spirituality, and body is created as physicality. But when the Eibishter brings together soul and body, It feels as though they were created together. That's the point. Therefore, in the nefesh v'aguf, the soul and body, nikroyim oir v'keli. Kabbalah says, and Chassidus brings it, that soul and body is like a lights and vessels. The hanefesh hu or oir, the nefesh is light, v'hagufu keli, and the body is keli. Now, what is he adding over here with this? Hillel, oir v'keli. What is the symbolism? And Yonason, we've learned this in Chassidus for years. What is added to our understanding of HaKadosh Baruch Hu by Kabbalah introducing the concept of Or V'Keli? So the Rashab has many pages on this in his discourses. And here he just mentions it like in a few words without really elaborating. I'll just say one word. Or V'Keli means we understand each other. Why? Because the Or's objective is to shine. And where does it want to shine? It shines all over. But at the end of the day, it wants the shine to be internalized. Right? Like we said a few weeks ago, when the Or shines, Yoni, on the garbage, it's shining there too. But nevertheless, the appreciation is not there because the garbage is not really a keli for the Or. You understand? So that's why we call that an Or makif, an encompassing Or, a superficial Or. When we talk about an Or pnimi, an inner Or, it means the Or is for the keli. So the Rashab here, who's talking about the unity of body and soul, I believe, is adding the following. That when body and soul get together, it's not just a shine, an Or that inspires, and it's so inspirational that everyone's inspired, including the body. No. The Or is taking into consideration the needs of the body. You hear that? The Or says, I'm an Or for your body. And this Or says, I'm an Or from that body. In other words, the Or is measuring itself based on the body. And that's what we call an Or pnimi. So possibly that's what the Rashab is adding here to this conversation of Guf and Nefesh being totally different and in his language opposite each other. At the very same time, Yoni, it feels as though it's very natural. So that's why he says, why is that? Because it's like Or V'Keli, where the Or wants to be recognized in the Keli. In other words, a teacher who's teaching, he wants that the students who are learning from him should at the end of the day, not just understand it, but take that information and use it to understand more. That shows that they really got it. Not to just understand what he said, because they, it's inspirational, it's good material, it's good information, it makes sense, but they do nothing with it. The real achdus is when the keli becomes Or. Okay, here's another kvetch, another emphasis. The real unity between the Or and the keli is when the keli becomes Or. And in a way, when the Or becomes keli. Vash, what time is it?
It's 5 past.
Let's continue. Now he says now, V'hinei gufa adam shira kadosh baruch hu esoif miyitzirosoi. The person's body was created differently, miyitzira's gufa shara nevroyim, from the creation of other creatures' bodies. Ashabon v'yotzar kadosh baruch hu. The chol nevroyim meaning kishab amar kadosh baruch hu oisoi hamaymer. All other creatures, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu said the certain mimer, the certain saying that's applicable to that creature, miyad nifra gufa, immediately, this is Pshat and Bereshis in Genesis, immediately their guf, that body, that creature was created, v'nichtas behem nafsham, and a spirit went into them, a soul, ushneim, haguf ha-nefesh, they're both together, the soul and the body, ke'echad yotzu, they both came out, al pnei adam, on the face of the earth. Kemoy b'yom gimel, take for example the third day of creation, k'om HaKadosh Baruch Hu, tachi oras desha eisa mazriya zera eitz v'ri eisa b'ri lamanina, they should grow grass, And the Torah says, and what so? Grass came out. The earth gave forth, sprout forth, as so asavim, the grasses, v'seilonis, and the trees, kol echad ve'echad, k'meshehem, each one individually, im nefesh hatzomach shebehem, with a vegetative soul in it. So in other words, as soon as Hashem said, vayehi chen, they came out with a living soul. So too with the animals, the earth gave them out. They were already all fully alive, the animals. The gam hamayim, also the water, the water had these things that creep of living life. V'hainu. The Chola Nevroyim, all creatures. What was the manner that we Hashem created all creatures? It is that the body with their soul, with their spirit, came out together. Let's finish the thought. Conversely, how was man created? Shina HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem changed as B'riyosai, his creation of man. Man's body was created separately. Earth, dust from the earth. Without any soul of energy in it. It was domain. It was inanimate. It was silent. It was dead. As the Torah says, God created man, dust from the earth. Right? First, this man was a goylem, was a formless piece of meat, flesh. And afterwards,
no. Rabbi,
what?
Mud.
What?
It was mud. It wasn't flesh. It was mud.
Mud. Okay, fine. That's what I meant. Good. Yeah, that's what I meant. Okay, thank you. The point being that this mud, this material, came out of the earth, not living, not with spirit. In comparison to the way Hashem created all other creatures. The first thing Hashem said about man, here is a guf. He created from the most coarse material, the gas and grub, which is inanimate. This is what it means that he came out dust from the earth. And was a goylam, was bud, a goylam, belishum chayes, without any vitality. The harishiflus gedoylei odom, the havi, and this was and is a great shiflus, a great embarrassment for man. In comparison to all other creatures. The hayos, next page, the hakoil, hoyim offer, because everything was from the dust. Nevertheless, they still were created in a way when it came together. But whereas man, he just repeats the point. First he was mud, a goylam. Only afterwards did Hashem blow within him a spirit of life. So the Rebbe asked the question, so the Rebbe established, the Rashab established that there was a difference. Now the question is, why did he make this difference? No, it's a good question, Moshe, no? Avi. Why did Hashem decide to make a difference between the way he created man and the way he created all other creatures, Yoni? This difference is a negative one. Because all creatures, Although all creatures come from the earth, avalim zad nevertheless leiniru binivlusam b'yoisam goylemin kim b'yois gufam nafsham ka'echad. All creatures, when they came out, you don't see their nevola. Nevola means they're disgust. You know, if you're just a piece of clay, you're lifeless, it's disgusting. So Hashem didn't make that by all creatures, because as soon as they came out, they were breathing. They were fully an animal. They were a full tree. Whereas the Adam, the way man was created, you see, man was initially created b'nivlosei. In this, form of crudeness, he calls it, disgust. Being formless, and only afterwards and later, Hashem blew in it the soul of life. And what do we say? That although seemingly all other creatures have one up on man, they are not Pchir HaNivroyim. Who is the choicest of all creatures? Who is Pchir HaNivroyim? Man. And the most choicest of Hashem amongst all of the creations. And that's the Rashab's question. Seemingly you would think that all creatures were created on earth in a nicer way. They looked nicer, they felt nicer, they smelled nicer, they tasted nicer. Why? Because they came out full. Man came out like a goylem. Yeah, later on you blew a soul into him, but when he came out, when he was created, he came out ugly, meaning it's like the beginning. And yet we say Hashem specifically chooses Gufa Adam, the body of man, as Pchir HaNivroyim. Pchir means the choicest, the best. And that's the Rashab's question. We'll stop here. Emet Hashem, tomorrow we'll continue. Okay, have a good day, everyone. Sei gesund. Refuah Shlema to your father, Yoni, and only good psuras. Take care. Take care. Bye-bye.